Week 9 of fantasy football is on tap, and we have a bunch of trade targets for you, contenders specifically, to go out and get. Quick reissue to the guys that we still think are great trade targets. We've just talked about them in recent weeks. The trio of Ravens: Lamar, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry. With Lamar coming back, they're still really good. Great schedule down the stretch. Nico Collins coming off the concussion, still a good trade target. Marvin Harrison gets the Cowboys this week, still a good trade target. Judkins with the shoulder injury, maybe look into some medical stuff there, but you should get a nice discount on him if you want to go after him. And then Justin Jefferson and Brock Bowers, if you're going stud hunting, you can definitely go after those guys as well. But Danny, do you want to get into the first trade target of the video here?
Yeah, and I just will spoil a little bit of a hint. You guys are going to watch the video that comes out potentially later today by the time you're watching this. I may or may not have half those guys rostered in the reissue section.
Yes. Danny did make yet another trade in the Flock League. And I promise you guys, you might be thinking, oh, you guys are doing this for content. No, this is actually how we are. If you guys, maybe the other guys are doing it for content. Can't speak about the other creators, but this is how we are.
Dude, anytime we have an opportunity to improve our teams, this is why we're the stock exchange. Like, a lot of people are just like, oh, well, you draft the team and you stick it out. Like, no. If I have an opportunity to make my team better, I will be able to do so. And it is funny because my first buy actually had to go the other way in the trade I'm alluding to. I tried my hardest to make sure I kept him involved in my team because I really wanted to keep him on my roster, but the trade was not getting done unless Jaylen Warren was going back to the other person in the deal. Jaylen Warren is my first buy. I feel like I'm on crazy pills. Like, I don't understand why I go onto the site consensus and I see this guy RB18, RB19, that low rest of season. Because we're talking about a legitimate bell cow running back. Now, obviously, people are, going to have the stigma. Week 4, he gets ruled out right before that London game. Week 6, he kind of comes back, limited workload, but also keep in mind he was on the injury report that week. In these last 2 games, he has been an absolute bell cow in week 7 and 8. 70+% of the team carries, and he saw his route share and 2-minute drill work peak in week 8. And that was a big factor because a lot of people were like, well, every time they get on third down, Kenny Gainwell is coming on the field. Anytime they go inside the 2-minute drill, Jaylen Warren is getting off the field for Kenny Gainwell. Jaylen Warren played 100% of the 2-minute drill snaps. And when you combine bell cow usage with arguably the best running back schedule down the stretch, although he's only scored 12.5 PPR points per game this year, in weeks 11 to 15 in particular, he plays 5 of the 10 worst run defense in the NFL against opposing running backs this season. The Steelers, they're in a tight divisional race in the AFC North. Obviously, we mentioned the Ravens trio. They're going to be back at full health. That is a very, very close divisional race. You combine that with Cincinnati potentially getting Joe Burrow down the stretch. They're going to have to win every single game. And really what I've learned from that game against Green Bay is they view Jaylen Warren as a big focal point of their offense. Again, you can buy him as a mid to back end running back 2 right now, maybe the RB17, RB19 type of price tags. But given the schedule, I truly wouldn't be shocked if he was a 15, 16 point per game scorer down the stretch.
Yeah, I have him ranked as RB17 rest of the season, so I kind of do view him as more of like a mid RB2. But like you said, given the schedule and the fact that the Steelers, while they're not a sexy offense, I would say, like, you don't jump for joy that you have pieces of the Steelers offense. They are a good rushing offense. So if you're going to have one of the 2 guys between Metcalf and Warren, you probably want the running back. And like you said, there's absolutely no threat. Part of it, I think the hesitancy is that initially coming into the year, we had the Caleb Johnson threat. That is a non-existent threat currently, like an absolutely utter non-existent threat. This guy's a couple days away from being game day inactive. Like, that's how little of a threat Caleb Johnson is to Jaylen Warren. So yeah, I'm definitely on the same page that I think if you can buy him for mid RB2 price tags, especially if you're running kind of like a hero RB build where you have like a Bijan or a Gibbs or a JT or something like that, and you're like, I need something better than Kenneth Walker or, whatever your RB2 was in that type of build, I think Jaylen Warren's a pretty affordable guy to go after, especially when you consider maybe you have an extra Jordan Addison lying around. Maybe you have a Khalil Shakir on your bench. Maybe you have a J.K. Dobbins on your bench or something like that you could upgrade into Jaylen Warren. So yeah, I think this is like probably one of those marginal upgrade moves if you go after a Warren, because you're probably using like a Walker, a Dobbins, or a Shakir, or Rico Dowdle or somebody like that to go up and get him. But I think it's a worthwhile upgrade that could end up paying off.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this guy as a sell later in the video, but if you can swap DeAndre Swift straight up for him right now, DeAndre Swift obviously coming off a high these last few weeks has looked really good, but he's a 50% timeshare committee back. Like, we have seen Kyle Monangai involved. Kenny Gainwell is not involved remotely like he was in week 5 and week 4. Like we saw, for example, if people woke up to that London game and saw Kenny Gainwell pop 3 touchdowns, I really feel like that skewed their perception of this backfield.
Yeah, potentially. I would be curious to know what it looks like if the Steelers are kind of getting screwed, like they're getting dominated by another team. I think Gainwell would be more involved in a game script like that. But I mean, they lost the game to the Packers, and Warren was still heavily involved in the game script there. So moving into my option here is George Kittle, and it's pretty straightforward. You and I were huge George Kittle guys coming into the year, and not really anything has changed. The only thing that's changed is that Kittle was dealing with injury, and it looks like he should be back fully from that hamstring pull. It was, a couple weeks ago. He got a lot of rest there. His target competition is virtually gone. I mean, we still don't have Ricky Pearsall back on the field. No real timetable on when he's coming back. Juwan Jennings is playing through multiple injuries at the moment, apparently, and he's been pretty ineffective when he's been on the field. My boy Brandon Ayuk is at best probably not going to be back on the field until week 11, week 12, based on, like, they sounded like they were going to open his practice window, maybe come back by week 10, week 11. But I would say it's getting pushed down the road even a little bit more. The key thing for me is that Brock Purdy is going to be back soon. They're talking about Brock Purdy not being a long shot to play in week 9, which at the very least you'd imagine he should be back by week 10 or week 11 at the latest. Yeah. I would say that George Kittle, now removed from this hamstring injury, with the way Christian McCaffrey is playing, the way the offense will operate once Brock Purdy is out there, this is a guy that come Brock Purdy, let's say he gets back on the field week 10 and onward, it wouldn't shock me if George Kittle's the tight end 1 in fantasy from that point on.
Well, their healthiest player in terms of target competition coming into the year. Again, keep in mind, obviously, Christian McCaffrey, a factor to the backfield. Like, I'm not, muting that. But let's just say their healthiest wide receiver that we pointed as target competition coming into the year, the big 3, Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings. The healthiest of that bunch being Juwan Jennings, who, by the way, played through 5 broken ribs. Like, this is not a healthy group at all.
No, and again, maybe one of those guys makes significant contribution down the stretch, whether it's a healthy Pearsall coming back or Ayuk gets back on the field or something. Either way, it's less competition than we thought George Kittle was going to have when healthy at the beginning of the year, when we all pushed him up to the 3rd round or whatever in fantasy drafts. So for me, he hasn't had his quarterback. Most of his target competition is gone. It stands to reason in my mind that when Brock Purdy's back on the field, they're going to start scoring points like crazy. And also, too, their defense is much worse now than we thought it was going to be coming into the year.
Yeah, I think that's another big factor. Without Nick Bosa, without Fred Warner, they should be in higher scoring game environments inherently, because guess what? That 49ers Anaconda defense may be holding teams to 7 points, 10 points on any given week. Maybe that turns into 20, 23 points, Yeah,
not to mention over the rest of the season, really, their only difficult matchups for the tight end position are Cleveland in week 13 and Tennessee, who's technically good against tight ends, but they're just a bad team overall. So the other games, you got the Giants this week, the Rams next week, the Cardinals, the Panthers. In week 16 and 17, they have 2 of the easiest 7 defenses against tight ends, Indianapolis and Chicago. So this is a really, really good schedule for George Kittle, in addition to things kind of coming together with Purdy coming back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm in on Kittle as well. If you can get him, maybe it only costs you tight end 7, tight end 8 type of prices, which is about what I expect. Again, it's not like
there's a sell at tight end that I'm going to talk about that I would swap straight for George Kittle, which I think you will be able to.
I'll plead the 5th there.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it in a second. Who do you got? We got 2 Buccaneers in a row here, so we can kind of group these guys together. And I'll let you talk about the first one.
This one feels like low-hanging fruit. Everybody and their mother can look at this profile and say, Bucky Irving is the biggest buy in fantasy. The issue is only certain teams can actually buy him. If you're 4-4, I even think it's very tough, because you're sacrificing week 9, week 10 is a tough matchup. Can you really afford to trade and potentially go to 4-6 if you deal for Bucky Irving? That would be the hesitance that I would have. But if you're in an advantageous situation, maybe you're 5-3, maybe you're 6-2, 7-1, 8-0. If that's a simple situation you're in, Bucky Irving is a profile to potentially be a league winner down the stretch, because after the bye week, after that tough matchup against New England in week 10, you're getting back to Bucky Irving, a guy that was at 72% of the snaps, 71% of the carries, and 50+% of the routes in his 3 healthiest games this year, as potentially a top 3 to 5 running back. Because basically what you're looking at here is he was at 18 points per game with the Bucs offensive line completely banged up. Keep in mind, the most efficient running back in the NFL last year, 5.42 yards per carry, was averaging 18 points per game on 3.34 yards per carry in his first 4 games. It's pretty simple here. The Bucs offensive line, it's healthy now. As soon as Bucky Irving's healthy, we're looking at a 70+% snap share player for a top 10 offense and an offensive line that's going to be playing much better than it was when he was averaging 18 per game. It's pretty simple, because when I'm looking at the landscape of the running back position, The only guys I can confidently say will outscore Bucky Irving down the stretch are Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe argue Achane, James Cook. Some of those guys could probably
Those are
do it as
arguable,
well.
though.
But yeah, that's like on the offensive line point, because I have some insight, obviously, about this team. Luke Gadecki, I would suspect he'll be back on the field within the next 3 to 5 games. I'm not sure he'll be back because he got put on IR in week 2. So he's technically eligible to come back now, but he's still not practicing in full or anything like that. So I would imagine like kind of like the Ayuk timeline is probably when he would be back on the field. And I also think it's possible that Graham Barton gets moved to guard because he's kind of struggling a little bit at center, and he played really well at left tackle, actually, when Tristan Wirfs was out. And Ben Bredesen played a lot better at center than he's played at guard. So he's a veteran.
Blue.
Barton's still very young, obviously. I think it's possible that they shuffle the offensive line in addition to it being healthier. Cody Melk is going to be out for the season, and he's like a Pro Bowl right guard, so that kind of sucks still. But I think that the run game in general will be more efficient after the bye. Baker Mayfield has not been healthy the last 2 games. Emeka Egbuka has not been healthy the last 2 games, who I'll talk about in 1 second here. The offense should get Chris Godwin back as well, and Jaylen Mcmillan within the next 4 or 5 games as well. So I think that this team in general is going to get a lot healthier, and that's going to result in a lot of good things involved for Bucky Irving.
And the schedule really opens up. Like I mentioned, week 10, tough matchup, New England Patriots. They've been absolutely phenomenal against running backs. He's probably going to have a down game that week. After that, though, in terms of high-scoring game environments, very, very good run matchups overall, at Buffalo, shit ton of points are going to be scored in that game. At the Rams, shit ton of points are going to be scored in that game. Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, at Carolina. And then in week 17, when your fantasy season is on the line to win that championship, he's got the Miami fucking Dolphins.
Yeah, no, it's a great situation. A lot of home games left for the rest of the season too, other than the Rams, Bills, and I believe the Week 16 game. I believe we're home for every other game, if I'm not mistaken.
Week 17 on the road.
Actually, Week 17 we're on the road in Miami, but that's a short trip, and we'll probably dominate the fandom in the stadium anyway. So, Bucky Irving, definitely a great trade target. Same goes for his teammate Emeka Egbuka, because if I gave you the timeline for Emeka Egbuka before the season, we would all be screaming buy him ASAP, because in Emeka Egbuka's first 5 games, only Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown scored more fantasy points. Like, we're talking about a legit 20-point-per-game receiver when he was healthy. In week 6, he suffers a hamstring injury, misses most of the game. It kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. And then in week 7, despite most fantasy doctors saying it was impossible, he plays on Monday Night Football against the Detroit Lions. Keep in mind, Baker Mayfield misses him on a couple of throws. He had 12 targets in that game and only caught 4 of them. So it was a bad game in general, but Baker has played like absolute garbage the last 2 games against New Orleans, and Detroit easily could have had much better fantasy days than he posted against Detroit and he posted against New Orleans, because he's had inaccurate balls, underthrown balls, misses, that kind of thing on bye in week 9, which is the perfect time to send offers because he's not going to be in people's lineups. And Baker Mayfield's getting healthier. Emeka Egbuka is getting healthier. I saw Deepak tweet out that the ramp up should, take place for Egbuka. He should be fine after the bye. From a health perspective, they have the Patriots, Buffalo Bills, and Rams the next 3 games, which are all high scoring matchups, all league average wide receiver defenses. And again, keep in mind that Mike Evans is not going to be on the field probably for the rest of the fantasy football season, including the fantasy championship. If I had to guess, I think if we get him back, it'll be for the NFL playoffs, not the fantasy playoffs. And Godwin may be back to help the offense pretty soon as well. Bucky Irving is expected back. O-line getting healthier. Most importantly, Baker getting some rest because he needs it badly. This dude is a top 10 wide receiver rest of the season, and you will not have to pay top 10 wide receiver price tags for him.
Yeah, I agree. I believe he's my wide receiver 9 rest of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Let me take a look. He is my wide receiver 9 rest of the season and a top 21 player. So if you can get him like 28th overall player, wide receiver 12 prices, like realistically, can you swap Devontae Adams in a piece to be able to get that done? Can you swap
Devontae Smith in a piece to be able to get him?
Michael Pittman in a piece to get that done is another factor. Big game, obviously. They crushed the Titans. 23.3 fantasy points. By the way, I knew that off of heart because he did it on my head top in the flock league. But T. Higgins as well scored a touchdown. Chris Olave, another guy that's been consistent all year. Can you swap any of those guys plus a piece to get to Egbuka? Because we're looking at a legitimate 18 plus point per game profile the minute they come off by.
Yeah, well, and you can see some of the trades on the screen there. Jaylen Warren and Addison, DeAndre Swift and Shakir, Kyron Williams, basically straight up for Egbuka. Devontae Smith's basically straight up for Egbuka. Like, he's going for wide receiver 2 price tags. He ain't going for top 12 price tags right now, even though when healthy, he was a top 3 receiver in fantasy with Mike Evans on the field for some of those games and Chris Godwin on the field for some of those games.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think he's quite easily one of the biggest buys right now. Another thing too. Oh, we're so right. We told you guys to sell Egbuka. It was always going to come down. Regression. It's like the buddy had a fucking hamstring injury that everybody expected him to miss 3 to 4 weeks, and he played the next game. What are we talking about?
Yeah, no, most fantasy doctors said once he suffered the hamstring injury in week 6 that he wouldn't come back until after the bye. Not only did he play, he still commanded targets. It's not like he was useless. Like I said, if you watch the Detroit Lions game, go watch every Emeka Egbuka target in that game and tell me he couldn't have easily had 20 fantasy points. Go watch every Emeka Egbuka target last week against New Orleans, a game in which he had a 35% target share, by the way, and tell me he couldn't have scored 20 fantasy points in that game very easily if Baker could actually throw the ball accurately. We know Baker's an accurate quarterback. He's clearly not playing healthy at the moment right now, and he's said such. I watch all the press conferences. I've heard him say he's happy to get some rest this week.
Like upper body stuff, you think?
Yeah, well,
like
he was dealing with a biceps injury earlier on in the week. He's been dealing with lower body stuff. It's not really specific what he's been dealing with, but I think it's affecting his throwing motion, whatever it is. And I've seen him miss more throws in the last 2 games than I've seen him in his entire career miss as a Buccaneer.
Yeah, no, another factor here. Also another factor if you have Bucky. Maybe you get a healthy Baker, that offense returns to, 25, 30 points per game. And we saw Bucky Irving, like we were talking about, legitimately be another big-time buck in your lineup. Go buy your Buccaneers, especially now that they're on bye and they're kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and last week I talked about Chris Godwin, and I would still make sure to monitor his injury status, but I still think he's pretty much free, and you could get him tacked on to deals just as an upside piece, and he's not a terrible option to go after as well. Let's move into another rookie wide receiver here with Tetairoa Mcmillan, who this season has been pretty solid. Like, he's been a full-time starter every single game. He's also wide receiver 18 overall in fantasy points at the wide receiver position. He's averaging 12.5 PPR points per game. So this is a dude that is running the routes, has a 27% target share on the year. It's kind of been a matter of Bryce Young either not playing well or last week, obviously not being healthy and Andy Dalton starting for that game. But I think the law of rookie wide receivers get better as the season goes along is the number one reason why I would be buying Tetairoa Mcmillan.
Well, that's pretty much my case here. Like, he's been the model of consistency this year. Realistically, outside of 2 games, he's been at 7+ targets, actually 8+ targets in all but 2 games this year for a rookie wide receiver. And this is a really cool stat. Shout out Ron. He tweeted this out. But Tetairoa Mcmillan has 31 first downs on 37 receptions. The next closest player on the Panthers receiving core has 8 receiving first downs. You talk about an alpha and a wide receiver core. That is exactly what Tetairoa Mcmillan is. We already have the volume. There's no question mark of his status as the number 1 here. I actually do think, though, with the further ramp up of a Jalen Coker, with Bryce Young getting healthy, we could really see this offense play a lot better down the stretch. And while the production hasn't been overwhelming, like you said, only 12.5 points per game, I just want to bet on a young player showing out as one of the better wide receivers in the league. At this point, he's been the entire Panthers passing offense. If we can increase the value of those targets, it's pretty simple to plot out the 15+ point per game formula with him.
Yeah, well, think about last year. Let's go weeks 1 to 8 in 2024. What was Brian Thomas Jr. scoring per game? I'm literally looking at this right now because I want to know, because I think if you just think about it, Ladd McConkey wasn't an every week starter at this point in the season. Brian Thomas Jr. was not an every week starter at this point in the season. They were probably really solid flex options for a lot of people and whatnot. But I'm looking at it right now. And in the first 8 games last year, Brian Thomas Jr. was 11.0 fantasy points per game. Ladd McConkey was even in the top 50. I don't even think. Okay, he was 13.5 points per game. So we're talking about flex players like Tetairoa Mcmillan is right now. Like, he's 12.5 points per game or whatever. And I think that Bryce can play certainly a lot better than he's been playing. There's some upside if he does kind of put things together a little bit. Also, for whatever reason, he does play well at the end of the season every year. It seems like he plays better at the end of the season than he does at the beginning of the season. And Carolina has some decent matchups coming up. I mean, Green Bay this week is not like a super easy matchup, but they've gotten a little bit easier for wide receivers. He has the Saints, he has the Falcons, the 49ers, the Rams, the Saints again, the Buccaneers, the Seahawks. Like, none of those are like overly daunting. They're all about league average matchups.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, with McMillan, if he keeps playing the way he has been, like, I think almost ensured he's going to be at least a 14 point per game scorer. Like, we see this every time when a rookie dominates out of the gates like this. Why would we bet on them to get worse?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And his quarterback play has already been bad. So it's like, oh, you could say his quarterback play is bad, but it's like it's already been bad. Like it's not going to get any worse than it is right now. So if it gets better, which there is upside for, like did anybody think Mac Jones was going to lead Brian Thomas Jr. to the promised land last year? No. Play like if Bryce plays like 2024 Mac Jones for the Jaguars, then we could be talking about T-Mac having a 15 to 18 point per game ceiling from this point onward, which you're not going to pay that price tag for him. You're going to pay wide receiver 28 price tags, 24 price tags, maybe at best right now.
Yeah, like for example, I have him, I believe, as my wide receiver 23, 23 rest of the season. And I don't think you're going to be able to have to pay that type of price. Like realistically, if you're in a more casual league, you might be able to flip like a Jaylen Waddle straight up for him, a DK Metcalf straight up for him, I mean, are we getting gutty saying Diggs plus a piece can get you Tet McMillan in some leagues?
No, like think about some of the guys that have come off of good weeks too. Like Khalil Shakir just had a huge play. Like how much more on top of Khalil Shakir in a casual league would you really have to pay for Tetairoa Mcmillan? Like it wouldn't shock me. Like, because again, sharper leagues know Tetairoa Mcmillan has a 38% target share on 3rd and 4th down and a 27% target share overall this season. That's a sharp league thing. They follow usage. They understand that. In casual leagues, people literally just look at how many fantasy points you're scoring. And Tetairoa Mcmillan has been a flex play caliber fantasy asset this season so far, but we're expecting it to continue to get better. So that's why we're buying in on him.
Yeah, I mean, we do. You guys would have seen the graphic, but literally the last 4 games, 30% target share, 44% air yard share. You know where you see those numbers, Corey? You see those numbers in the top 5 to 10 receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, that's what Puka Nacua does. That's what CeeDee Lamb does. That's what Justin Jefferson does. That's what those Jamar Chase does. Like that's what those guys do. And again, functional QB play the rest of the season. And Tetairoa Mcmillan has a 17 to 18 point per game ceiling. It's legitimately within the range of outcomes. He needs to play a little bit better at the catch point. And I saw Matt Harmon did a great write-up on all of the rookie wide receivers, and he kind of bucketed them based on who's an every week starter, whose usage is trending up, and who's kind of a stash. And he talked about Tetairoa Mcmillan. He's like, the ceiling here is for him to do what McConkey and BTJ did last year, which is that you just get better as the season goes along. Because he's like, when I watch a tape on Tetairoa Mcmillan, he's getting the usage, he's getting the targets. He and Bryce need to develop a little bit better of a connection, and he needs to play a little bit better at the catch point, at the nuances of playing wide receiver.
Well, exactly. It's like how many times do you see Joe Burrow give a little finger motion to Jamar Chase and hit him right perfect timing on a comeback? How many times do you see Dak Prescott motion to CeeDee Lamb, call the play or change the play at the line, get him into the right look, and just absolutely pepper him across the middle of the field? Like those are just natural things that a young quarterback wide receiver duo are going to have to learn together. And unfortunately, I mean, Bryce and Tetairoa Mcmillan are both in the young camp. It's not like Tet went to a situation where you have an established 32-year-old.
Well,
you don't have.
It's not shocking that Tetairoa Mcmillan had a top 12 scoring week with Andy Dalton this week, even though it was a game in which the Panthers got blown out by 37 points or whatever they lost by.
Well, exactly, man. Like, and again, we'll see how Bryce ends up playing down the stretch. I do tend to think he's going to improve, especially with Jalen Coker healthy. But regardless, this is just the profile I want to be betting in on.
Yeah, and I think I've had a little bit of copium on Bryce Young in general, just because I think, he hasn't shown us too much evidence to say that he's like a franchise quarterback at this moment in time. But even if he's just as bad as he's been,
can he be
Tua? Tetairoa Mcmillan could still score 14, 15 points a game.
Can he be Tua?
Yeah. Can he be Tua? Can he be like, Mac Jones from last year, like I said, for Brian Thomas Jr.?
Even Mac Jones this year.
Even Mac Jones this year. Let's get into Jake Ferguson, who's the last kind of buy that we have here. Pretty straightforward, cut and dry case. Anytime a guy drops a donut, it's a good time to go out and send offers. He was a tight end one, in 6 straight games before this week. And from weeks 1 to 7, he had averaged 16.2 points per game this season. This is a guy that legitimately was the best tight end in fantasy. Dak and the Cowboys offense traveled to Denver. That's a very difficult task. It's hard to play in the altitude. It's hard to play against that defense. And that's a top 5 defense against fantasy tight ends. Ultimately, whether Lamb, Pickens, or Ferguson get the job done through the passing game, they're going to rotate weeks. They're going to have down games. It's just going to happen. They're all good target commanding players. And you have the Cardinals this week, which should be a high scoring game environment. After the bye, they have the Raiders, then they have the Eagles, then they have the Chiefs, then they have the Lions. Think about some of the implied point totals for the Cowboys there. And then in the fantasy playoffs, you have the Vikings, Chargers, and Commanders to close out the season. So ultimately, is Jake Ferguson going to have 2 or 3 more down games the rest of the year? Probably. But he also is probably going to have another 6 freaking tight end 1 finishes.
Dak this year has 2 separate games of less than 200 yards and 0 passing touchdowns. That means the 6 other games, He was at 250 plus passing yards and 2 plus passing touchdowns. Actually, sorry, correction. 1 week he had 1 passing touchdown. Dak's been playing at an MVP level. Clearly, the blip on the radar was that Denver game. You get Arizona, you get the bye, and then after that week, you got the Raiders. You got the rematch against Philadelphia, but this time it's at home. Keep in mind, the Cowboys at home, much different. They're a type of team that has to make a ton of pre-snap adjustments. Dak, you see him at the line of scrimmage every game. It's a lot harder to make pre-snap adjustments, Corey, when you're hearing the Denver crowd on the road versus when you're at home at AT&T Stadium.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I personally am very much buying in on Jake Ferguson, and we can pivot right into the sells because one of the guys that I'm using to buy in on Jake Ferguson and George Kittle is Oronde Gadsden. And it's not because I don't love Oronde Gadsden. If you guys were following us in the Dynasty offseason, you know that we did. It's that Oronde Gadsden and the Chargers receivers in general are going to be like the Cowboys receivers. Like it was a Ladd and a Gadsden week the last couple of weeks. And Keenan Allen had a big game a couple of weeks ago. Quentin Johnston's going to have games. He's going to get back in the box score. He's going to score fantasy points. And I don't think Oronde Gadsden, knowing that he has not had a disappointing week yet since everybody's been bought in on him, is going to continue to never have a disappointing game again for the rest of the season. I believe that what Oronde Gadsden is a top 6 to 8 tight end rest of season. Maybe there's upside for more. I'll definitely grant that. But he also played the Colts 2 weeks ago, which is the easiest defense in the league against fantasy tight ends. And he played the Vikings on Thursday Night Football this week, which is also a pretty easy matchup. So for me, I think that, let's say this week, we see a Ladd and a Keenan game, and maybe Gadsden has a down week. I think that Jake Ferguson and George Kittle project just as good, if not slightly better. And I think given the market value and the hype around Oronde Gadsden, you might be able to get George Kittle plus for Oronde Gadsden right now, or Jake Ferguson plus.
So my current tier 1 at tight end, I got it as McBride, Kraft, Warren, and Bowers as the top 4. I think that's a pretty consensus top 4 at this point. Like I'd be shocked if people had a different top 4.
Yeah, I have those guys. I have Warren and Kraft flip. That's the only difference.
Yeah, but like those 4 feel like interchangeable. Basically, is what I'm referencing. My tier 2, I think it's Gadsden, I think it's Ferguson, I think it's Kittle. I don't think it's outrageous, and I have it ranked that way. That Gadsden's the 5. Because realistically, a 91% road share for an offense we believe in and a quarterback that's been playing at the level of Justin Herbert, it's undeniable that the upside is quite literally tight end 1. So I do want to bake that in. I understand it's a small stretch. It is a rookie day 3 raw tight end coming onto the scene and playing 91% of the routes and literally leading an offense in terms of receiving. I can't fade what he's doing, honestly. That's really what it comes down to. I understand the process move is probably just taking the more proven contributor. But I also don't think Ferguson and Kittle have the upside that Gadsden has if he continues to play at the level he has been. I think we're looking at a potential 18, 19 point per game tight end.
That's fair. I think it would be pretty outrageous to say that George Kittle, one of the best tight ends of his generation, does not have the upside to score that many points.
He's a stud. It's just the way Gadsden's been using it. Like it literally looks like what Darren Waller was on his year.
For sure.
On the Raiders.
I would redirect you to what is on the screen right now for why I think Gadsden's a sell. Let's say you picked up Gadsden and you already had a tight end. You already had Kraft.
In that scenario,
you already had Ferguson. You already have Kittle or something. Gadsden plus Rico Dowdle for Devontae Adams. Gadsden plus, a bench piece or a waiver ad like Jerry Jeudy for Zay Flowers. Gadsden plus Tajay Spears for Emeka Egbuka. Like this is what you can do with Gadsden right now. I think his value is that high on the open market.
Yeah, and especially I would say if your tight end is like Goddard, Kincaid, like that type of range or worse, I would hold Gadsden. But if you have a Kittle, a Ferguson, Brock Bowers, a Kraft, a Warren, if you have another one of those top 7, I would say the top 7 of the guys I feel confident week in, week out, I'm getting an advantage of at tight end. And I view Gadsden in that group. So if you have another one of those guys and you could sell high on Gadsden, I'm cool with that in principle. But if you're just selling Gadsden and your option is like, oh, I have Kyle Pitts, I'll be good at tight end, do not sell Gadsden.
Yeah, I will say Kyle Pitts has by far the easiest strength of schedule for any tight end. It's not even close the rest of the year. Every single one of his matchups is like a top 12 matchup.
Who rosters Kyle Pitts?
What's up?
Who rosters Kyle Pitts in the flop?
I do, but I don't want to trade him because I actually think he also got 9 targets last week and he has 4 receptions in every game but 1 this year. 4 or more receptions, in every game but 1 this year. Yeah, he's actually a really solid option too. But yeah, Gadsden to me is just a shop. I'm not saying you got to sell him guaranteed, but if he is going to be Apollo rocket in terms of market value in your league, because he will be in some leagues, then I'm cool going after a Jake Ferguson with him. And did you want to do it straight up? I would. If you don't want to, that's fair. Maybe you need a plus to actually pull the trigger on something like that. But I'd prefer Jake Ferguson and George Kittle rest of the season still, even despite Gadsden as great as he's been. But
same here for me. Like they're very close.
Yeah, let's move into your sell here. You got DeAndre Swift, kind of a reissue for us. We've talked about him in past weeks. He still does have a couple really good matchups in a row, would be my only pushback, but the usage, I'm sure, is what you're going to point to.
Yeah, it's the usage. Again, I'm not going to go and completely slander DeAndre Swift like I was prior to the bye. I mean, that take kind of aged like milk. I basically said he was a waiver wire level running back out of the break because Mononkai would take more work. Listen, DeAndre Swift is arguably playing the best football of his career. I will give him his flowers. He looks good. The offensive line's playing well. And I mean, we're talking about legitimate production in these last 3 games. But I also think he's got quite the market right now because 3 straight weeks of 25.5, 20.8, and 15.1 PPR points. And it's not like the usage just completely changed from what we saw in the first 4 weeks. Because we actually look, his usage in the first 4 weeks was higher than it's been now. It's just he's playing substantially better as a football player. So if you can sell DeAndre Swift at a top 12 to top 15 level price tag, like the recent production would maybe point to, I would engage in talks. We talked about Jaylen Warren earlier. Can you get Jaylen Warren plus for DeAndre Swift right now?
Maybe you could get Jaylen Warren and Jake Ferguson for DeAndre Swift right now. I think it's possible. But yeah, that's a good shout. Again, it bears repeating. A couple other that I can quickly rattle off just as honorable mentions. Over the last 4 games, these are some overperforming wide receivers. Devontae Smith is a top 8 wide receiver over the last 4 games. So this is a guy that you could maybe use to tier up. DK Metcalf, a top 10 wide receiver over the past couple of games. Romeo Doubs and Chris Olave, top 15 wide receivers over the past couple of games. Stephon Diggs, a top 20 receiver over the past couple of games. Khalil Shakir, a top 24 wide receiver over the past couple of games. And then looking at the running back position, you have guys like Javonte Williams, a top 6 running back. Maybe you could use him to buy low on a Bucky Irving, maybe get Bucky Irving plus even potentially. I think it's possible that Breece Hall is a half decent sell high right now, just given that his schedule is not easy as that matchup was against Cincinnati. And he's pretty much only been good in easy matchups this year. So that's one guy that I would mention as well.
Report today too. Apparently the Jets will not be entertaining a Breece Hall trade at the deadline. And that was some implied upside we had in our Breece Hall ranking.
Yeah. And I also think the handcuff fill-in guys are going to lose a little bit of value going forward. So the Rashad White types who are probably going to see Bucky Irving come back. Rico Dowdle, also another one of those guys that you can maybe sell on. But yeah.
I will counter one thing with Rico specifically. Again, it depends. Like if you can use him to tier up in a deal in a 2-for-1, sure. But like we do have the quote from Canala saying like they're going to reevaluate the running back touches. And the only reason you say that is because you're basically admitting that Rico Dowdle looks better.
Yeah, he does look better. And I think as a Chuba Hubbard manager in our listener league, I'm actually legitimately worried about him. It's not like I'm just going to cope and say that Chuba Hubbard's the better running. He has outsnapped Rico Dowdle the last 2 games, but you have comments coming out saying that that's maybe not going to continue. So that's kind of where I have to pivot a little bit. I still do think that Chuba Hubbard's not terrible. But anyways, that will do it for us here. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the site for all of our updated rest of season rankings. Our dynasty rankings gone through a big update. Trade value chart through a big update as well. Use the trade calculator, use the My Teams feature, go out and make some trades. Do not do the thing that a lot of people do when they have a good fantasy team, which is sit on their team, not do anything. Be proactive, because if you go back and look at your team that you drafted or the team that you started the season with, what you want to see at the end of the season is marginal improvements being made. You want to make moves to tier up from that wide receiver 3 that's overperforming, to get up to a wide receiver 2, to tier up from that RB2 that's overperforming, to get another RB1 on your roster. That's how you work the market. That's why we do what we do. That's why we're the exchange. That's why we've made 15 trades in the Flock League this year, it feels like.
You're about to see the newest one.
Like that's why, because I look back at the team I drafted and the team I have now, and the team I have now is much better than the team I drafted.
Dude, I looked back at my roster after the recent trade you guys are going to see today, and I'm pretty sure I counted 3 total players that were on the team that I drafted.
Yeah, like we make moves, man. We upgrade our roster. But yeah, let us know down below if you have any trade questions. Like, comment, subscribe. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.